Welcome, everyone. The MASSP podcast is back for season 9. My name is Ryan Casey, and I'm excited to kick off the new season with MHSAA Executive Director Mark Ewell. Mark joined us a few times last season to give MASSP members an update from the world of athletics. He's back to talk with us once again about the 100th anniversary of the MHSAA, some changes and updates to the sports seasons, as well as his thoughts as to why participation rates in Michigan continue to rise above national averages. We always appreciate Mark for taking the time to join us, and I think you will really enjoy this episode. So enjoy your ride to or from school, your run on the treadmill, or however you like to listen, because another MASSP podcast episode starts now. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day, as I know the fall season is winding down and we're getting ready to start the winter season. For joining us on the MASSP podcast. I know we got to do this a handful of times last year, and I really enjoyed the time we got to talk about athletics and its impact on principals and administrators. So just really appreciate your time today.
You bet, Ryan. Great to be with you.
You know, as I was preparing for our conversation today, I was on the MHSAA website, and I noticed that you are celebrating a big 100-year milestone at MHSAA. So I'm just curious to hear from you, besides kind of the cool marketing opportunities you have going on as you're looking back at history and celebrating some different exciting events coming up. Can you just talk about what that milestone means to you as executive director of MHSAA and maybe some fun things you guys are celebrating this year?
You bet. So the big date, it's December the 13th, because hard to believe, on December 13th of 1924, a group of school leaders at the time, and it was almost all principals, got together because they wanted to set up essentially a basketball tournament or some basketball games in the late winter of 1925. So we're talking that era in between the two world wars. And really, it was that first meeting of that group of school leaders in December of 1924 that really became the first meeting of our board of directors, which is now the Representative Council. And yeah, hard to believe you hit the fast forward button, over 100 years, and here we are today. When I traveled around the state this fall with our update meeting series, we certainly made a big deal of the 100th anniversary or birthday. I'm still not quite sure if I use anniversary or birthday, but nevertheless, it's 100 years. We really kind of took the opportunity to talk about why the MHSAA does what it does, why we have rules, why we have expectations. And the example I gave on the road show this fall is I've had a daughter who's been involved with a lot of AAU basketball over the last decade, and we've met some wonderful people, some great experiences, but our biggest takeaway from that program is really anything goes in terms of fan behavior, in terms of the way that parents treat coaches, the way that coaches treated officials. And really, again, my daughter wants to play basketball at the next level, which it looks like she'll do. She'll head to Grand Valley next year. But my wife and I mean, we celebrated the last AAU event ever this summer, just because you see so many things that are really a byproduct of having no expectations, no standards, no code of conduct. So I know that our job as school leaders have really gotten more difficult after COVID, to where there's really kind of been at least my perception has been, kind of this growing groundswell of, what parents want, that's what will happen. We're taking back, those educational decisions, those school decisions. And I think it's become much harder for school leaders to say no over the last 4 or 5 years, because, the fear is that you say no to the wrong person in the wrong situation. And now you've got 200 folks that show up at your next board meeting. And I think if you ask most superintendents, board meetings have even gotten increasingly more interesting over the last handful of years. So it was an opportunity for me to certainly highlight our 100 years, but also kind of the underlying message is there are times in school sports where we still have to say no. There are participation in our programs are a privilege, not a right. They're not just simply taxpayer teams that because they pay taxes, I get to play and we really get to do whatever we want. So we kind of use the opportunity, Ryan, to really kind of look back to, because with so much turnover that we've had now in so many school leadership positions, it was really a good opportunity to kind of describe what we're all about, what the foundations are, and what our what are really our core beliefs continue to be moving forward. So happy 100th, a lot of excitement, the cool logo, a lot of that kind of kind of the bright, shiny, cool stuff that comes with it, because there's going to be some neat opportunities to really look back and amplify some of our history and some of the really neat things that have happened. But really, from the chair I sit in, is we really wanted to take this opportunity to kind of get back to basics, and for a lot of our new leaders to really understand who we are and what we do.
Absolutely. And it must be working as you're focusing on the basics and what makes MHSAA so great as compared to some other after school opportunities, because it looks like, numbers come out from the previous year and it looks like the participation rates continue to climb for our Michigan student athletes. And it looks like Michigan is, even when you compare it against the population decline or school enrollment declines, participation for athletics is going up, and it looks like we're outpacing a lot of other states. I think this was the case last year when you and I talked as well. So again, I'm referencing the 2023-24 academic school year. What do you continue to attribute that to as to why our numbers are going up when maybe other numbers or in other states are going down?
I think part of it is I think there's a lot of reasons. The first is I think we have really healthy relationships with a lot of our partner professional organizations in our state. So I think the relationship between the MHSAA and MASSP, between our organization and the superintendent's group and the school board's group, and even, our relationship with our statewide athletic directors group, Michigan. So we hosted in the summer, 2 summers ago, the leadership of all of the national athletic director associations across the country. So kind of that quarterback of each state's AD group. We actually met in Traverse City 2 summers ago, and we met, and for a half hour, literally myself and Carolyn Narr, who now coordinates the MIAAA, our statewide ADs group. And for a half hour, Ryan, we simply talked about the relationship between the MHSAA and the MIAAA. And the people in the room were dumbfounded, because the relationship in many of the other states is so contentious with the state athletic office and their school groups. Now, part of it, there's a lot of other states, I would say probably 30 or so states, that when schools commit violations, or simply when a school has a coach or a player ejected, there are a lot of states to where the penalty is a fine. So at your school, if your coach gets ejected, it's a $500 fine. Or if you get a student athlete that gets ejected, it's a $100 fine. And certainly, that more punitive approach tends to get people's attention. But what I've really learned, being in this building now the last 21 years, is with that kind of system, it creates an awful lot of hard feelings, to where it doesn't really feel now like a partnership. It really feels more like it's almost a business transaction, if nothing else. So I think part of it just the climate that we're able to work in our state, to where easy connections between our 2 groups, between our ADs group. So that really, really helps. I think our local school people do an unbelievable job. As schools over the last 30 years in Michigan have continued to shrink, but we continue to be creative to find opportunities for kids. And that's across our state, urban, suburban, rural, UP, Lower Peninsula. And I'm telling you, you look at the numbers, and I am continually blown away why our participation numbers continue to increase, but yet population decreases in a lot of parts of our state. So I just think that there's some real synergy in terms of the relationships, the different groups, and God bless our MASSP members, to where we have lots of school principals that see the value of being involved in other things, not just athletics, but any kind of co-curricular or extracurricular. But athletics tend to really be in the front seat of that bus most of the time. And it really is, it's a team effort. And a big part of that is with the support we get from MASSP.
Absolutely. I know from my experience as a high school principal, meeting with incoming freshmen or new students who are entering in your school district, it was always a big push of, again, even if it wasn't sports, band, art club, drama, something, be involved after school. We put you in a safe, constructive environment with an adult that's going to look out for you. You got a group of people you get to sit with every day at the lunch table now. We get to hold you accountable, make sure you're passing your classes, right? And you're not getting sent down to the principal's office for behavior. So that was something that we always strongly promoted at all the schools I was in, and that's probably helps attribute to that increase in participation. I'd like to think at least.
So much of the mental health data I've read, Ryan, really since
Mhm.
COVID especially, is when you really strip all the numbers and everything else away. At the end of the day, what do kids want? They want to belong to something. They want to fit with a
Yep.
group. And I'm telling you, when with athletics, you've really got, depending on your school size, anywhere from 7 or 8 or up to the high teens or low 20 different options of little friend groups, communities, to where really it becomes less about the actual sport and
Yeah.
it becomes more about the relationships and just feeling a part of something, which is, what you've done with esports has just been
Yep.
tremendous because there's yet another group of kids that I don't think were probably part of, certainly some kids were, but I think you're reaching yet another community of kids to where you've given them an infrastructure and a group to belong to that maybe we
Absolutely.
hadn't been serving with kind of what our old structures have been. So I just think kids want to fit in and they want to be a part of something, and that's why I think athletics are so powerful.
Absolutely. I'd like to jump in now to the actual sports season. I know at the time of this recording, we're kind of catching you at the end of the fall season. Some playoffs have started. So just anything you want to share, some feedback is in terms of how the fall season has been going. I don't recall there being any really major changes that happened from this fall. I know a year ago we kind of had a change with some of the football championships, some location things, but it's kind of everything been back to the traditional guard, if you will.
Been a fairly normal fall. The weather has been phenomenal.
Oh, you said it
It's
out
just
loud.
I know that's all
Uh-oh.
right. I've been saying it now for the last month, so I'm gonna keep continuing to trouble. But I mean, it's amazing that with good weather, how moods and attitudes tend to be just a little bit better. And no, it's we've gotten everything in. I mean, golf and tennis are already completed. We had just phenomenal weather through those championships. We're in the last week of October. So this weekend we'll have over 2,000 runners at MIS for our cross country championships. Boys soccer finals are also that day, and then we're really left with girls swim and dive, volleyball, and football yet to come. It really this has been the first fall, Ryan, really since COVID, to where it's been full speed ahead. All of the issues and the controversies that we've had to work through of what I call normal controversies. We're kind of back to that normal ebb and flow, which really has felt good. And I think we're beginning to really push the federation, the national federation who writes our playing rules, that we don't need to change rules all the times just for the sake of change. That we're really in a good place. And as you said, with so much of the turnover that we're seeing in school administrators, there's something to be said for really being able to kind of go back to basics and really, I've been in this chair now for 7 years, and a lot of those things that you and I, when we were both in the building, we would go to a Jack Roberts update meeting and kind of get that that sermon of why we do what we do. And we're now almost at a decade to where I just think our school people need to know the basics of how athletics should fit within your school community and what our organization is all about. So that's been really, really effective.
Awesome. So sounds like fall season has been going well as we kind of look ahead now, again, catching you in before winter starts. Any updates regarding the winter athletic season or any of those sports? Any changes?
So this winter will really look the same as what former winters have done. But now a year from now, so in the 25-26 school year, the winter calendar is actually going to shrink. The winter sports calendar is going to shrink by a week. The feedback that we have continually gotten from schools is that the winter season seems to go on forever. So right now, currently, we have 5 weekends to where our winter championships finish up. And by the way, that 5 weeks of winter finals on our staff really spreads us thin. But what we're going to do is we're going to go from 5 weeks down to 4. And we're going to move earlier into the winter just because we're now seeing a big movement of schools. Spring breaks are seeming to get earlier and earlier. Back when you and I were in the building, or even, thousands of years ago, at least when I was in school, typically spring break was the first full week of April, or it was even connected to Easter. Well, what a lot of districts have now done with that state testing window in early April is we want to send our kids out on break. Let's get them back in the building for a week, and then we can roll into that testing window. So a lot of schools now, spring break is now that last full week of March. Well, that was conflicting in a lot of cases with our last week of basketball championships, to where we'd have schools that made it to the Breslin, and you'd say, well, gosh, our crowds are a little light. Where is everybody? Well, half of our schools had already gone on spring break that Thursday or that Friday. So winter's going to end earlier. So now our winter end is going to be right around the middle of March rather than the end of March starting next year. Our boys basketball finals girls will both be at Breslin, but boys basketball will always be first. And the basketball finals will be on the same weekend as the Big Ten basketball tournament. With Michigan State playing it wherever the Big Ten tournament is, we know Breslin will be open and available. And then that following weekend, which will be the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament, that will be the end of winter. That's when our girls basketball will be played also with the Breslin. So it also gives the end of winter a little earlier. I think spring sport coaches will feel like, well, for the first time, you've done something for us. Because I just think historically, spring coaches have always felt like they tend to get the little bit of the shorter end of the stick. So it's a shorter window of winter by a week. Spring coaches will get their athletes with less overlap and less conflict. And I also think it will fit better with schools in terms of spring break and then that spring testing window. So lots of input that we've gotten over the last 3 years on this. So we did approve the change, but we didn't want to tweak calendars for this year. So there's a little bit of kind of a heads up for winter in 25-26.
Awesome. Well, the former high school basketball coach in me agrees that season is incredibly long, and you forget it's dark when you go to school. It's dark when you get out of practice, so, and then the current high school softball coach in me likes getting those athletes a week earlier now too. So thank you for sharing that change.
Yep.
I know you're busy.
And actually, Ryan, spring practice is still going to start at the same time, but I think what we both meant is you're going to get more kids because there's less conflict and overlap.
Correct.
Who's finishing up winter. So winter will kind of, be put to bed a week earlier. And yeah, so now Ryan, as a spring coach, your first day of practice will really be
hopefully have all
first day of practice with all of your kids.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying. I know we got to get you back to working on wrapping up the fall season. So I appreciate the time, Mark, sharing out with our MASSP listeners. Is there anything else that you just want to share now regarding MHSAA that you think principals or administrators, especially those who are new to the role and maybe don't have that athletic background, would maybe just like to know or should know?
So I just think that when it gets to student eligibility, we'll kind of finish where we started with, our programs do have rules, regulations, and expectations. And especially if you've got some newer personnel in your school and you have that student that transfers in or that comes into your school as a new student, we've got to make sure that they're eligible before we allow that student to participate. So if you have a newer principal, a new AD, our staff, this is a place when you call our number, a human being still answers. You're going to go from one human voice to another human voice. And, kind of the mantra we use is that when a new student comes to you, in terms of their eligibility, if in doubt, you've got to find out. And until you find out, we really need to sit them out. We're seeing far too many, and a lot of times that's a terrible cliche, but I think you got the point. We're just seeing some new folks where you get that brand new kid that comes to you, and without really kind of digging into the story or at least picking up the phone and saying, hey, we've got a new student, here's his or her story. Where are we standing with eligibility? We're getting, a few schools this fall that just move forward, allowed the kid to play. And of course, of this age and day of the internet, neighbors are watching and they see that this student now plays in a game or two or three, and they ask, the very fair question, well, this kid was at our school a year ago. I know where they lived. I actually drive by their house every day to my work, and they're still living there, but now they're at the neighboring school and they're eligible. So I just think, when in-service opportunities come about for school administrators, we need folks to attend. And especially when you have that turnover in staff, we continually have to reteach and retrain rules and regulations. We try and make our rules as simple and as straightforward as they can be. We try and avoid the gotchas and the bear traps, but I just think it's a good reminder to everybody. And is it fair or not? I don't know. But generally, even the better the athlete or the higher profile the athlete, the more questions you have to ask. You have to do that due diligence of finding out what the student situation is, and even then connecting with someone in our office before we issue that uniform and allow the kid to play it. It just avoids kind of those bear traps for everybody, especially our newer folks.
That's a really good reminder too, especially for our new administrators who might not be as familiar with that process. So, Mark, thanks again so much for taking the time. Best of luck with the rest of the fall season, and good luck with the start of the winter. And hopefully we can have another conversation like this maybe as winter ends and the spring season comes around.
Sounds great. Thanks, Ryan.
Yep, thank you. And that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening to the MASSP podcast. Remember, you can listen to this podcast and others anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Just search for MASSP or hit the subscribe button right now.